Welcome to Project Insights Professional Development Series. Topic today is the top 5 communication pitfalls of project managers. This is the first of a series, a professional development series that we're going to host here with Project Insight. We'll have one a month, and towards the end, we'll show the next couple of topics that we'll be sharing with everybody. And please welcome our instructor today is Diane Buckley-Altwies. She is the CEO of Core Performance Concepts. Diane has been managing software development projects for 30 years as a program manager or a project manager in the insurance, financial services, and healthcare industries. She's co-authored 3 books about project management. She also continues to teach and consult for organizations on various program management, project management, process improvement, and business analysis topics. And she develops courseware topics for project manager. She's lively and engaging speaker at professional meetings and symposia across the country. She was also honored in 2013 as a fellow of PMI of Orange County, California. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
Great. Can you switch to the next slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. So just a couple things before we begin. All participants will be on mute during the call. You can ask questions via chat in the chat window, and I'll be paying attention to those so that I can ask her some questions as we go. The PM training is valid for 1 PDU, and you have to be in attendance for the full session. At the very end, we'll have a slide on there with the instructions on how you can retrieve your PDU, and we'll send them by the end of the week. And there will also be a webinar link for the recording for those of you who would like to do that. So, and I'm Steve West. I'm your host today. I'm with Project Insight. At Project Insight, we automate the project manager. We help you automate doing the project management job. We unify your data. Ultimately, our goal is to make your life easier, your work life easier. You can always schedule a demo with us. Go to our website if you're interested in our tool. So, Diane, let's go. Go ahead and take it away.
Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody to our first of several project management training programs with Project Insight. And I want to thank you for having me here. As we go through this, we're going to go today over the 5 communication pitfalls of project managers. And, we only have an hour together, so there's obviously going to be questions you have or places that you might want to do a deeper dive. That chat area that Steve mentioned is going to be a great place to capture all that information so we can provide additional content for you as the months and years go by. But anyway, so let's get started. We're going to talk a bit about 5 communication pitfalls of project managers. As Steve mentioned, I've been a project manager for many, many years. I've seen a lot. As what I tell many people is many times you have to fail to be able to really understand, what you should be doing. So don't ever be afraid of doing little failures, because you learn a lot from that. So we're going to talk about the 5 communication pitfalls of project managers. We're going to identify, as part of this, ways to identify the symptoms of some failures that might be out there and ways for you to fix them. We're going to highlight 5, as I said before. There's probably more, but we're going to stick with 5. A lot of times people say that communication is 90% of a project manager's job. As I said, with regard to experience, my honest opinion is communication is our job. And everything we do is communication. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to continue to improve that communication. We're going to look at why sometimes these communication pitfalls happen. We'll talk about some of the consequences that it causes. And then also at the very end, we'll talk about the various approaches that you can have to solve for some of these areas. I guarantee you that all of you will raise your hand saying, yeah, I've done that before. My team has done that before. So it's a lot to go through. We got an hour together, and we'll hit them as best we can, and then give us your feedback on anything you might want to drill down deeper into in a subsequent seminar.
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions, and I'll be asking some as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, first we want to talk about symptoms of communication failure. So if I go into a organization, whether I'm a consultant or just a project manager working with a new company, I'm going to be paying attention to a lot of things. And you want to see where we can improve. No project is going to be successful if you have communication failures. There was one time, many times, one time that I was talking to one of my my clients, and they kept saying, well, that's a communication failure. That's a communication failure. I said, honestly, everything is a communication failure. It's recognizing what caused it, what's the symptoms, and what you can do about it. So one of the things, the first one is really if you're seeing silence. We're going to talk about that a bit more, but teams that don't openly communicate with each other, there's going to be some failures out there. The second one is no repeatable documentation. So if you're not using templates and you're recreating things every single time, there is high risk of having some communication failures. So we want to talk about repeatable documentation. Over budget. If you're consistently seeing projects consistently over budget, there's absolutely some communication problems going on. And the last one, and I'm sure there's more, just limited ROI or just poor results. Did your client get what they expected out of this initiative? And if they aren't, and if they're not raving fans of yours, then something went wrong. So as you can see, there's a lot that can go wrong. So let's tackle one at a time of what could.
Yeah, sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. Let's see if I can get this thing going. There we go. All right. One more little theory thing. Most of us, if anybody in this room has gone through any project management training, you absolutely learned about the communication model. And as you all know, or you should know, that it is not a one-way channel. You have the sender of the communication, the message they're trying to communicate, and then the receiver receiving that communication. How many times do you assume that it's all one way and that receiver should have heard what you said?
Always.
Well, the reality is thanks, Steve, is that it's two-way. It's a two-way street. And if the receiver doesn't confirm back that they understood the message, then you have not communicated. So how many times did you send an email out? How many times did you send a text message out and never got a response, and you just assume, well, I sent them an email. They shouldn't be doing it. Now, the problem is it's not always their fault. There's a lot of noise out there. We all get hundreds of emails a day. We are all working on multiple things a day. Most organizations that I've seen, the project team does not have the luxury of working on one single project at a time, all 100% resource allocated to that project. I mean, that would be an ideal case. Some of you that are working in a pure agile method, you might have that, but most of what I see out there is not. So you have to recognize that it's not a one way, and there's a lot of noise competing for your message to get to the right person.
I have a quick question about that.
Of course.
Nowadays we have, 20 years ago was just email or phone and meetings, but now you've got email, phone, Slack, Teams,
and then you sit here,
text. How do you
older,
juggle all that?
Yeah, as you get older, where did I communicate that? I struggle with, okay, did I do Slack on that, or did I send them an email? Did I talk to them live, or did I just text them?
And do you ask your project team to try to get on one platform before you start to help with that?
Not asking them to get on one platform. I think you need to understand the purpose of each platform and use it in the right way. We're not going to cover that today, but that might be a really good one to tackle, in a subsequent session, because to me, text is not a decision-making tool.
Right.
But
yeah.
You're not gonna make a decision on text, or you shouldn't. But we'll kind of hit that one. So let's put that as a little placeholder, and we'll kind of come back to that one.
Yeah, great.
So the first pitfall is not defining the purpose of the project. So I wanted to bring up two things here: what the definition of a corporate charter is and what the definition of a project charter is. And if you read through this, because I'm not going to read these to you, they're very similar. If you are starting a business, you have to define the objectives, the structure, the operations of your business. A project charter is very similar. You're defining the goals, the objectives, the resources, what you're trying to obtain out of this, what's your ROI. It just might be a smaller subset of a corporate charter. So if you think about a charter being that definition, if you're not using some level of charter, you're not setting the expectations with your team as to what the goal is. So when you think about a project charter, it's no different than any business out there that needs to define what their purpose is and why they exist and what they're trying to accomplish.
I have we have a question about that though, or
Sure.
carry on and I'll answer
Sure.
it
No,
first.
go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
So like we talked about, the charter being a really important document. What about for small projects? How do they, if it's like something they do over and over and over again, should there be some kind of charter on each project, or is that what the corporate charter is for?
Nope. The answer to that is yes, you should always have some level of charter. And the main reason why you should is because every single project, what do you think the one thing that always changes on a project?
The scope.
The people. No, the people.
Oh.
The people.
Yeah.
So if you have the same people time after time doing the exact same thing, well, that's more like operations. That's operations. So every single project's going to have different people. It's going to have different stakeholders. So it's really important to take the time to spell out a charter. And the little sample here is a one pager, basically, what it is. And a lot of times companies use their own statement of work or change requests as that charter. It's at least a place to document what was the expected outcome, what's the client wanting out of this, and what are some of the steps that we're going to do to deliver it, and maybe some risk and maybe some resources. But at the very minimum, it's authorizing that the project is viable and you should put energy and resources toward it. The one thing to really think about, and not every project will go as planned. We know that, right? And things do change during the course of a project. And there is nothing wrong with regularly reassessing that everything's aligned on the project. You bring this back up. You bring up the document and you bring it up with the team and you show them and you go through, are we achieving what we expected to achieve? Has the environment changed to where maybe it's not even viable anymore? Maybe you were working on an initiative for a new product enhancement, and then some other, innovative idea came out into the marketplace that really kind of eliminated your opportunity to achieve your goals. There's nothing wrong with stopping a project when it's no longer viable. So it really is a living document, and it doesn't have to be large, and it should be there for every single project we work on.
And like, how often would you sit down and look at it again? Like once a week, once a month?
No,
as needed.
That's going to be. It depends. If anybody's done one of my webinars, maybe when was the last time we did this? A couple of years ago, Steve. We always talk about the answer to every project management question is it depends.
Yeah. Okay.
People
want to know roughly, but I guess you're saying like on an as needed basis, you should go back to this document and look at it and update it possibly.
Yeah. And if this goes to the maturity of a project manager, you're constantly thinking about that as you're going through your day.
Yeah.
And you should know this charter inside and out. And as things evolve and as issues come up and risks get identified and you address those risks, you should be always thinking about, okay, is it time to maybe reassess what we're doing here and make sure that we're still on the right path and everybody's in agreement with where we're going? I don't think we do that enough. Most of the time we get our little document and then we're off and running and we just deliver what we thought it was, and we never question it.
Well, I
And
think
that's
it's easy to get caught up in the details of running the project and not necessarily reassessing, are we doing what we thought we were going to do in the beginning,
right,
you know?
right,
So,
absolutely. And
but,
it's all about what's the goal, right? So
mhm,
perfect segue, right? One of the other pitfalls is not defining what proof of success is.
mhm,
So a lot of times, well, let me step back here. Many of us probably on this call probably have heard of the word SMART objectives. SMART objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. They're meant to be yes, no questions. Like, did we increase productivity by 10%? Did we, were we able to process a new application in less than 30 clicks? Things like that are very specific, that can be measured. The one that you don't want to see is make it more user friendly. That's way too subjective.
mhm.
So the reality is, what we have to do is make sure we define that definition of done very smartly. And for those of us that are on the call here that might be on the business analysis side of the house, you guys are the ones that are really driving what those requirements are. And those requirements need to be measurable. What are we trying to accomplish? And if we make them very smart and we make them yes, no answers, then when you get to the end, it's very clear as to whether or not you've achieved what you wanted to achieve. Now, you can, I'll also ask the question out here, hypothetically, how many objectives should you have in a project? And most of the time I get people answering questions, no more than 10, or, 5 or more. But the reality is maybe 3 or less. And the reason I say that is, if I have 3 objectives and I miss one, did I succeed? And probably the answer is going to say no.
Yeah.
If I missed 2, I definitely didn't succeed. But if I had 10 out there and I missed 2, then it's a little bit grayer as to whether or not I succeeded, because those 2 might have been the most important ones to achieve the objectives. So
Mhm.
it gets very, very fuzzy if we're not concise and very clear as to what we want to succeed. We could try to be focused on being under budget, or we can focus on having high quality. You probably can't do both at the same time. So your objectives are the same kind of thing. We want to make sure they're very specific, very measurable, yes, no answers, and not maybe, and makes it very clear.
Yeah.
Okay, did you want to say something,
Well,
Steve?
I have a question. I mean,
Sure.
you mentioned a couple, just rattled off a few typical objectives. It it sounds to me, the way you were describing it, that each project can be whatever those objectives might be, and it's not
Correct.
always the same 3 things. And it,
Correct.
yeah. So, but narrowing it, do you find it when people try to put too many objectives out there in a project?
Absolutely. Because they want to get a new system in place.
Right.
And I'll use an example. Let's just implement a Project Insight. You know,
Mhm.
Nobody's going to take advantage of every feature in Project Insight day one.
Mhm.
And so what you have to do is say, okay, what's our biggest problem right now? And how can a project management software help us? And in the case when we were working on that project a couple years ago, it was, we needed a reporting capability to be able to share our progress so that we can do our revenue
Yeah.
calculations with accounting. That was objective number one. And we focused on that. We built our templates, we built our reports. And then when that was done, we said, okay, well, what's the next one we want to do? Or the next 2 we want to do?
Yeah.
Because we had that one done. I could sit here and say implement Project Insight, and I could have 400 objectives there, and nobody's
Yeah.
going to succeed, because you'll have 3 people working over here and 4 people working over here, and they're not cohesively managing the objectives. So smaller is better. Smaller number is better.
Right. So you could, if you wanted to achieve more in this in some kind of implementation or some kind of software project that you're making or whatever you're doing out there, just defining the 3 objectives and making smaller projects out of what is a bigger bigger thing, and ultimately almost like what a program would maybe be, right?
Yep. And for those that are working in an agile kind of environment, this aligns very well with the whole iterative process,
Yeah.
right? So you do iterations. You don't have to swallow the whole elephant today, but you need to know which ones you're trying to solve
And
and why.
if someone's doing agile, do you think that they should even do this as well? Like have a proof of success in our sprint, like that we should have 3 objectives that we're trying to get done, even in, because a lot of times they're just on autopilot in software, and I don't even know that it's really like, hey, what are we doing? And here's these 20 things, and should they do this as well for those
Yeah, well,
projects?
they in theory should, because that first little bullet says definition of done. That
Right,
comes right from the agile methods of, everything they're doing. They have to define what done is. So
right.
they're just doing it in a much smaller scale. And they should be doing it on every single sprint. What's a definition of done?
Well, usually it's a release of software to production or something,
But it
so
has to work. It has to be
yeah,
working software.
yeah.
So what's
So
that definition?
so maybe a bug-free deployment or something like that would be
Mhm.
one of the, having a certain number of errors or less.
Yep, that totally could be too. If
Okay.
one of the things you're trying to do is improve the delivery quality, that would absolutely be a great objective. You know,
Mhm.
we historically have had 20 defects every single deployment. Let's work
Yeah.
to improve that, and you start chipping away at what you've been doing that caused those challenges.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and this goes right into the whole thing about, what are the different kinds of goals you could have. The more strategic the project is, typically it's more about ROI, right? But you could have a project out there that's just trying to get a new product offering, which again, I can talk about ROI because it's about market share, it's about revenue, it's about profitability, et cetera. Or you can have a project out there that's just talking about how can we reduce costs. So there's lots and lots of different goals. And
Mhm.
that's why I said not every project needs to take the time to really define what you're trying to accomplish. And then everything you do within that project needs to be aligned with what those goals are.
Mhm.
Number 3, assuming scope.
Well, here we go. This is the hot potato topic.
This is the hot potato. Well, what's
I
funny
think so.
is I had a manager many years ago. Let's see. Yeah, half my life ago. Um, and he got angry with me because I wrote up what was included in the project and not included in the project. And he said, "Why are you putting what's not included? We don't want to tell them that." I said, "Yes, we do." I said, "If I don't tell them what's not included, then they're going to assume it's included.
Right.
And then we have nothing to go on." So if you think about it from a contract standpoint, and how many times have you been put in a position where the client says, "Well, I thought it was included,"
It happens a
and
lot.
you didn't really spell it out. So
Mhm.
guess what? You end up doing it, and now you just increase the scope and it wasn't expected to be in there. So
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of spelling it out, what's not included, what's included, and let the conversation happen before you even sign the contract.
So, but
So
what
this is all about communication, right?
Yeah, but what about like when we talk about software projects? I mean, this happens in any. I think this can happen in any kind of project. That's
Mhm,
construction,
mhm.
deploying something in business. But what do you do about, you know, we know things are going to come up when we make software here at our own company. We know things come up,
Mhm.
and like what I always try to do is kind of anticipate a certain amount of that. But how do you handle, when things do come up that you should do?
So the first question is the thing that comes up, does it help me achieve the goals that have been spelled out? Is it necessary for that?
Oh, that's a
If
good
it
point.
is, okay, I might want to consider it. But if it's not, then
Yeah,
guess what? That can go to phase 2, be in the
yeah.
next project.
That's
So
a
that's a
good
simple
process.
way. That's a simple way to kind of, manage that expectation. Sometimes it might be hard to prove that it doesn't affect that, but you could have 10, like I said, 10 things that I can do to achieve my goal. but those 10 things have different levels of contribution to that goal. So if you do have 10 things, which ones are the ones that you really need to make sure succeed? Because 4 of them might give you 90%, get you 90% of the way there. And that's another way to kind of trim down on the number of objectives, is kind of rank them in what is their contribution to the overall effort. So you might have the 20 defects that come out. Well, 10 of the 20 are this one thing. So that's the one I want to tackle. It's the whole, Pareto's law, 80-20 rule. Find the thing that's the most frequent, and the ones that are less frequent, you may not need to do anything with. Just let them be and not spend that time and energy. So not all issues that come up are created equal, in my opinion.
Well, do you leave in your project planning? Do you leave a little bit of
absolutely
slush fund? Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. No, you have to have your contingency.
And is there a percentage that you recommend? Like, if I have $1 million project, I should have $200,000 worth of additional slush fund. Is it like 20% effort more or less, or there's no rule of thumb?
I would probably say do some analysis on your own organizational projects, because there's probably tendencies, like, for example, in construction, there's always like this 25%, always plan 20 to 25% more because stuff comes up. In the company that I work with right now, their risk area is probably about, the problem is depending on the resources that are implementing the project. If they're newer resources, you're going to have to plan a little bit more. If there's the seasoned vets, not as much. So it's more about who's working on the project to do that adjustment versus, generically across all projects.
That's good.
So this particular, we're talking about scope, and, we're talking about, how are you going to manage some of these changes, and things will pop up. We know that. And I want you to understand the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. So what we're really trying to do is be effective and do the right things versus be just efficient. Efficiency is important. I want to be able to do things well, so if I have a junior programmer, they're going to be slower than a senior programmer, right? You would assume that, right? But what you want to make sure is they're working on the right things. Too often they end up working on the wrong things and not the higher priority things. And that could be efficiently working on the wrong things. So what you want is efficiency, but working on the right things. And that makes your whole program and your whole team more effective. Means they can get things done in a faster period of time and get things done well if you're effective. I have some teams that I've worked with. They're consistently over budget, and they're actually good workers. They manage to a process and they follow all those steps, and they're very efficient at all those steps, but they're constantly over budget. So they are being effective. They may not be the most efficient, but the client's happy at the end. So if I had to choose between one of the two, I'd much rather have somebody be effective than efficiently working on the wrong things. Efficiently working on the wrong things means you went down the wrong path and the client didn't get what they wanted.
Right. And so if they're working on the wrong things, I'm assuming that they maybe didn't define their scope very well, or maybe the priorities aren't set up.
Right. Yeah. It all ties together. Somewhere along the line, somebody went down a path and nobody pulled them back. Nobody reeled them back in, which is the project manager's job, to get them refocused on the things that they should be doing.
Yeah, that's hard. That's not easy to do.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. So, I mean, just to use an example, let's say you're doing a new website, and you say, we're going to do a home page, a product store page, we're going to do a blog page and contact page. And you all sign off, say, that's what we're going to do.
That's not ever what happens.
Nobody asks the question, where should we put business history? Where should we do sales page? What about white papers? What about team member pages? What about careers pages? All of a sudden, those 4 pages turned into another 5.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, the sales page, of course, on the product store page, we have to put a sales page, or, on the contact page, of course, I want to put careers and pay, careers page there. And it's so easy to digress
Mm-hmm.
if you don't spell it out from the beginning. And that's where the business analyst and the, requirements gathering is super, super important. And for those business analysts on there, it doesn't mean this whole thing means that you are not an order taker. Just because the client says they want it doesn't mean they should get it, because it may not align with the goal that the client was looking for. So most of the time you got a senior executive at the client side that's saying, I want this product, I want this process, I want this software, etc. And they have an expectation, but the people that are actually implementing it may not understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're the ones that are executing on supposedly what's included. And then they digress because they didn't have those conversations before. They're not thinking about it that way.
And this ties you back to your charter, right? I mean,
Yep,
making
exactly.
sure that the team members know what the charter is and what's in there, and so that they can maybe even help you stay on track if they say, maybe they are in there, hey, this doesn't look like it matches up with the big goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love when people ask those questions, like, does this belong? And somebody that was in those conversations early on can help answer those, or the project manager can help facilitate getting answers to those. But it's not being an order taker. Just because somebody says, well, I assumed the sales page was under the product store page, you can't just assume that. I mean, that's why it's very important to spell it out. Maybe we should have spelled out in the charter that there was 4 pages, and that was it. Did I create these 4 pages on this website? And those are my objectives. That's a yes or a no. Didn't say I put a sales page. Didn't say to put a white papers page. So you have to get that granular at some point in the project.
Yeah. Now that example is pretty straightforward. What if I have 1,000 requirements? Like how do you manage the time it takes to prioritize all of the different things?
There's going to be layers, Steve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would not expect the charter to have all 1,000 requirements. It could reference a business requirements document that's off to the side and saying that's the requirements for. And in some cases, you won't do the requirements until you start the project. So there's another reason why you go back and you adjust the charter. If maybe as you went through the whole business requirements discovery and you realize that, what they really need is a slightly different than what we thought it was, and you go back, you can recontract, or, there's all kinds of options that can happen at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing wrong with going back and reevaluating, reassessing that charter.
Yeah.
All right. So number 4, how are we doing on time? We're good.
We're doing good.
We're doing good.
I'll keep it. That's my job, is to keep us get on track.
Of course. Awesome job, Steve. Great job. Keeping us being very effective, right?
Hopefully.
All right. So the next pitfall is assuming what was heard. And this kind of talks to some of what you were talking about earlier, Steve, about all the different paths we have. And that causes a lot of challenges. And I don't care what anybody says. If you go look at the research, multitasking does not exist. And if there's 3 different kinds, it's attempting to do 2 or more things simultaneously. And, some of the things you can think about, I can do a conscious or an unconscious thing at the same time. I can walk and chew gum. I can talk and, look out the window, right? But I can't talk and write an email at the same time. Those are 2 conscious things that it just can't happen. And I can't listen effectively if I'm trying to write an email at the same time I'm trying to listen to a conference call. That just doesn't happen. Context switching is just going back and forth really fast. And that every single time, if you look at the research and what your brain does, every single time you switch, your brain basically has to shut down on what it was doing and it has to come back up on what it's now going to do. And then you switch again, it's got to shut down and it's got to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So this is being very inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just impossible these days because, you're talking, this is fundamentals that get increasingly difficult, I think, in today's society with all of the different communications. And then you see it all the time in a meeting like this, a Zoom meeting, someone's looking at their phone and then they get asked a question and they're like, oh, can you ask the question? It has happened to me a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
how do we today, like, I mean, is it just recognizing that this is a problem, and how do we we could have a whole hour on that.
Oh, we totally could. This is why I say go look at the research.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people think they can do it and they don't realize, and for those of you that are on the call, I want you to pay attention, because they don't realize that they can't. There might be 2% of the population that can actually multitask, but 98% can't. So once you acknowledge the fact that research does exist, and it does, then maybe you'll pay a little bit more attention on the calls. In the world of Zooming and everything else and these webinars and stuff, I know that half of the people on this call are probably looking at their emails and doing their emails at the same time.
Well, I mean, when you get a new team together, do you get them all together and share this with them and say, hey, look,
do in many cases, in many ways. And I also, if it's an internal call, I will call people out on it.
Oh, okay.
I had one of our customer success managers. We were on a phone call, and she said, and it was an internal call because I would never do this in front of a client, right? And she goes,
well, they're allowed to multitask.
I was multitasking, Diane. Can you repeat that? And I said, obviously you weren't. Mm-hmm. So here's what was said. But, I called her afterwards. I mean, we have a good relationship, but and we've had these conversations about it because we've had the conversation about how hard it is to try to multitask. Yeah. And she literally walked right into it, and we started.
Maybe you should make it fun and be like, I'm going to give you a yellow card for soccer because, like something funny about it, because I think it can happen to anyone. Like, if your kids call you on the phone and you're in a meeting, you're like, oh my God, I got to take the call because they expect you to reply like instantaneously now, know?
Well, the other thing too, if you're in a lot of remote meetings, turn on the cameras as much as you can.
Like that.
There's times when I go for my run and I come back here and I have to do a Zoom meeting. I'm like, sorry guys, not turning on the camera today, but I am paying attention. But I'm also one of those individuals that has accepted the fact that I can't multitask. So I pay attention, but you can require that people put on their cameras. Well, I used to prep people, like having Slack on once in a while at the same time. And I'd be talking to a client or whatever, and maybe our CFO or our CTO was on the call with us, and I know that they're multitasking or trying to. Mm-hmm. And so I would basically say, I would Slack them as I'm hearing a question that might be for them to answer. Pay attention.
But then you're multitasking, sending them the message to stop them from multitasking.
Yes.
So,
yes.
It's like a never ending, but I like the idea of the camera. I think that's a great thing for teams to, especially since, obviously I'm remote and you're remote right now. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times, our company, we were partially remote before all of the COVID, but now that people are doing the remote more because it saves time, it saves gas for cars and all that other stuff. I do think that the camera helps, but I think also people get Zoom fatigue from being on the camera too long. So it's just kind of a balance.
As we were talking about here, is you're checking your hair,
But I mean, I think people are afraid of the camera, but they shouldn't be, because we're all people and it's okay. So, right. But anyway, yeah. So you're saying, getting back to it, because people multitask and because they're doing so many things, your assumption when you message them is that they got it, but they don't. So what do you do about it?
Well, again, there's all kinds of things to work on. A, educate your team. B, ask them to, be on the meetings with their cameras as much as possible. Be honest about the fact that, people are not hearing everything when they're trying to multitask. So often you get to the point where it's like, we did have this conversation. And then you're like having to go back. Like, I know we had this conversation and you were on the call, right? And so you take the moment, it's like, because it drives me nuts. I go back to the meeting and they were on the call. And I guarantee you that they were like just not paying attention. So this goes to the whole inefficiency, communication problems. Somebody didn't hear what you said. Somebody thought, somebody took ownership of it, and then the other one is that the whole silence is yes. I've been known to go around the room. Steve, what's your task that you are walking?
I was going to ask about that, but I prefer, like, for us and our company, when we're talking about, are we releasing this software, I like everybody involved in there to give the go, no go. We put it on our board and teams that we're going or no going, and any one person says no, we're stopping.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on that one.
It's you have to kind of make sure that people have the opportunity to really speak their mind. And usually, especially in remote meetings, there's one or two people that are doing all the talking.
Yeah.
And that's another suggestion for the project managers here. Don't do all the talking.
I'm guilty of that one.
Have something that somebody else can talk about. This is all part of your agendas and who's speaking, etc. And this is why I like, us going back and forth on this, Steve. We can't have everybody talking on this webinar, but two of us, yes. So people are hearing different voices.
Yeah.
They're hearing a change. It kind of, allows them to perk up a little bit. Maybe they weren't paying attention. It kind of, shocks them a bit. Oh, I hear a different voice. What am I missing?
Yeah. And I like recording those meetings a lot, because a lot of times you have to go back and, what did we say again? And nowadays with Zoom and all of these platforms, you can double speed them, because it is time consuming to go back and then redo a whole meeting. But sometimes, like, I remember it was in the middle, sort of, and then you can get it close to that and then find out what you said. And it does help, because we used to not have these tools 15 years ago. I mean, you had Zoom, you had the webinars, but it's easy to record them and share them and all that.
Right. And it took a lot of space and couldn't share the big,
that's definitely an improvement.
Yeah, that's a great one. Maybe I should add it in here too, is just as one of those things of recording it. And I like to record it mostly for people that aren't able to attend, because if you're thinking about efficiency and effectiveness, inevitably you want these 6 people included, but 5 out of the 6 people are available, and one of the important people isn't, but they're not critical. So recording it so that they have access to that same conversation was really helpful.
Yeah, and we've been doing it with our clients. Every time we train them and onboard them, we record them and share them back out, because they can save them later, download them into their network. But I'm a huge proponent of video in general, because it's easier to produce video documentation of things than it is to write it all down. It takes more time. And then, when I see the fact that I have kids and my son can learn how to do a Rubik's Cube from watching YouTube, I mean, they can learn anything now online. So I'm a big proponent of using the video to help you with these channels of communication.
Awesome. But I think, again, the pitfall here is assuming that people have heard. So all these different tools will help you get to that point.
But at the end, your suggestion is to get people to affirmatively tell you yes or no, they got it. Is that what the main point of that is?
Understand that multitasking really doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you're going to be much more effective if you take the hour and pay attention for that hour, and maybe block another hour to work off on your emails, because then you're going to hear what's said in the meeting, and you're going to have an hour to work on your emails, and you're not going to make a mistake later that you're going to have to spend additional time trying to figure out later on.
Because the multitasking at the end of the day takes longer than not.
It does. It absolutely does, because you're just you're shutting on and shutting off. So you're hearing in a minute, you're not hearing a minute. You're hearing a minute, you're not. You're going to miss something. That's inevitable.
Yeah. And here we have our last topic, our
Our
last
last topic
pitfall.
of the day, number 5, is assuming that your team knows what to do. And I heard this little quote the other day or a couple weeks ago. Education and training in an organizational setting is a polishing action, not a structural change. So when we bring on people into our organization, we're expecting them to have some level of skill, right? That to do their job. But we're all trying to grow in our job. So we probably don't have everything we need to successfully deliver all the time. So as a project manager, you do have to understand what training is needed, what actions need to be taken, making sure people are clear with their assignments. I know in Project Insight, you got the to-dos in there. Now, if you're working with somebody that's a seasoned vet on putting QA test plans together, you don't need the to-dos. But if you got a brand new person, maybe you do. So recognizing the level of competency in your team and giving them additional tools to make sure that they're successful, and then ultimately follow up. I mean, that's one of the challenges is, we get these project teams and we kind of assume that they know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's another bad assumption.
Well, and one of the things that we've done in our tool to help make that better is that everyone has a really simple home screen for their team members and a really simple view of these are the things you're supposed to do in your project, and whether it's just one project or 100.
Mm-hmm.
The tool actually help narrow that down.
Yep.
But I think what you're saying here is even though we might have that tool to really make that easier for somebody, you still got to make sure they really know what those tasks that you
Yeah.
schedule for them mean
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. So training to me is a huge responsibility of the project manager, and recognizing when training is needed.
What if you're not the subject matter expert on something? Do you coordinate with the training or make?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So it's like, let me see if I can give an example. I know, like, it actually just happened the other week, is we have a new manager of support, and she's awesome. She gets it. And unfortunately, over the years, the support team hasn't had that level of management support to help them grow. And there's things that the support team certainly can handle to make the whole delivery process very efficient. But I know that if I just talk to one of them, that might help the one person, but it really needs to be kind of educated and trained to all 30 of the support team. So having that manager kind of go through, what it is that an extra step that they can do to really help and make sure the project delivery is successful, work with her. She then ensures that the whole team understand that, and she can reinforce that on a day-to-day basis. So you have to leverage your other organizations, because you're not going to be the one that's the subject matter expert. But you have to understand, like, what do my team members need to be the most successful in delivering this project? And that is my responsibility, right?
Yep.
I'm the one that needs to make sure that happens. So there's a really simple little formula. What is the need? What do they need to know how to do? And what do they have? What skills do they have? And then what's left to train? So this is that polishing action. So it's important for the project manager to get to know those resources, know where they have gaps, and understand the types of skills that are needed. Not necessarily know how to do that, but understand when there might be a gap, and then help facilitate that training. And you have to encourage the dialogue. So going back to our meetings and not listening and not hearing, somebody could be silent because they just don't know.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I think there are people that are afraid to say, I don't know. So I think it's important for a project manager to make sure that that it's okay to not know something. And it's really hard because of all the different people all over the world and different cultures now.
Yep.
Some cultures it's easier to say, I don't know, and others it's not.
Well, and that's why I really like the statement about the polishing action.
Mhm.
if everybody understands that, you know what, you're going to come to the job with a certain amount of experience, but you're not going to have it all.
Yeah.
You're not going to have it all. So let's help them add a new skill to their repertoire, right? Let's
Yep.
help them be better at speaking in front of a client. Let's help them, and again, me helping a team member get better at something is ultimately going to help the project.
Yeah.
And then this other one, this is a cute little formula here called pesos. May not be politically correct anymore, but who knows? This is an old one. So as somebody that is looking at where people need training, you want to prepare. They need to know what to do. You want to explain. So I know that we're going to need this kind of skill set to execute on this particular activity really well. So you need somebody to prepare that training. You need somebody to explain it. And then you need to show them. This is just a typical training methodology, right? Prepare, explain, show.
Right.
Once you show, then you should observe. Once you observe, then you're kind of supervising. So somebody might come and say, hey, I finished this. Okay, take a look at it. You say, oh, you know what? Not quite, but make these last couple changes and go to change, make those changes and come back. That's the supervised part. Not doing it for them.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
It is hard. A lot of us as project managers came through the ranks as, probably some skill set that we're comfortable with. And sometimes it's really hard to delegate. And where we typically fail is after we show, we leave. And then the person never gets any feedback. So although we're going back and doing this need, have, train, right? It's even more important to make sure after you've trained, you take that little extra time to observe and supervise.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we've actually done that in our own organization here at Project Insight is when we develop something for somebody, we actually like to have the engineers do the presentation at least internally to each other, because it does force the conversation of, did this really meet the need? I mean, I think it's easy for them to say, oh, I'm done, check in, move to the next task, without actually showing it. When I say them, like in software engineering, at least, it's easy to just keep moving down the task list.
I agree. And I know let me get to this last little one here, since we are getting close to the end here.
Yes.
So again, we've had our 5 pitfalls, and really what we're trying to do is, bring clarity to the project. So we want to make sure we have clarity of purpose. We want to document those charters. We want to share it. We want to maintain it. We want to have clarity of success. We want those defined goals and objectives that are measurable, that at the end, we know that we've actually achieved something. We want to have clarity of the scope, and that includes what's included and what's not included, and make sure our whole team is working on the right things, not just being busy and overwhelmed. And then we want clarity of communication, where we're not assuming, we're engaging with people on a regular basis, and not just assuming that they understand, which then brings the clarity of the capabilities, which is our responsibility to help our team succeed. So we have to think about the training aspect of it as we go through the delivery of a project. And the last piece is just make sure you're validating it. Just training them and letting them go doesn't succeed either. You have to train them and then verify that they're doing what you're expecting them to do.
Yeah, great. That was really awesome. Is there more? Yeah,
No,
I think that was really good. I mean, it was a good conversation for me, because, like, when we do this all the time, but it's not always, stop back from just day-to-day project management to redo our skills and stuff. And that's part of the reason why we're here to do. We're going to be doing this webinar every month, so that we can go different topic each month.
Yep.
And we got a comment in there from Chris Michelle. They said, great convo, thank you very much. So I'm happy that we did that. Can you move this slide also to the PDU? There we go.
Right there.
Yeah. So definitely, I liked the conversation. I think, just like I said, that you forget some of this stuff, and it's good to just step back and take a look at it again. And we'll just leave this up here for a bit while the two of us chit chat, and you guys can get your PDUs. We'll send a
Yep.
link. I think we're sending the link out afterwards as well. There'll be this
With
is
the
on our
recording.
YouTube channel, so if you ever want to come back and watch it again for whatever reason, you can do that. And next month, I think. Let me see.
I think we're doing January. I don't know if we're
Oh,
doing
we're skipping
December.
December.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm just gonna wrap this up, but we'll leave the PDU here. I'm buying time because I want to make sure everyone who attended can get this scan here.
No
But if
problem.
yeah, it's
But
also
yeah,
in the
if
chat
people,
there.
we got a few minutes left. If people want to, identify, throw in the chat, maybe the topic that you like the most. If you want to see us delve
Yeah.
deeper into something, that would be great as well.
Mhm. Well, we'll be emailing everybody who was in this one for the next one as well, and then our normal customer base. I think we send this out to as well. So, yeah, but we're about to wrap this up, and thank you very much, Diane, for your time, and we're looking forward to doing the next one with you.
Absolutely. I think the next episode, it does say
Oh,
January.
here we go. Here they go. January, we're going to do top 5 challenges of the remote project manager and how to overcome them. So that's
That kind of
obviously
hits that
very
one.
timely. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about best, what's the best, waterfall, agile, Kanban, all of that, which we all know nowadays, these are those topics. It's what works probably, I'm guessing right now, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than just the surface stuff. And then in March, switching PM tools gracefully, teams to the keys to that success. So we're looking forward to hosting that with you, and thank you very much.
Great. All right. And then there's some social media links.
Yeah, those are our LinkedIn and our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel. If you need to see this video again, and just go to YouTube and look for Project Insight. We have all our videos up there. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.